One day, a disciple approached the Buddha and cautiously asked, "Buddha, I pray every day, but it seems that my prayers are not being answered. You said that the power of prayer is great, so why am I unable to obtain what I desire?" The Buddha looked at his disciple and smiled gently. "With what kind of heart do you pray?" The disciple pondered for a moment and then answered, "I pray with a sincere heart. I am praying with all my heart, hoping that what I desire will come true for a better life." The Buddha nodded and said, "Yes, many people pray like that. However, true prayer is not just about getting what you desire. Prayer should be a process that changes your heart and transforms your life." The disciple asked back with a puzzled expression, "What does it mean to change one's heart? I just hope my life gets better. Is that wrong?" The Buddha quietly looked at the pond and spoke, "Praying without purifying the heart is like trying to reflect the moon in a muddy pond. Just as the moon cannot shine clearly if the water is not clear, if your heart is clouded by greed and attachment, the power of prayer will inevitably weaken." The disciple fell into thought for a moment. Then, "Buddha, how should I pray?" The Buddha looked at his disciple with a compassionate gaze and spoke, "I will tell you the story of a prayer that even the heavens were moved by. Hearing that story, let it help you realize the true principle of how prayers are fulfilled." The disciple clasped his hands together, preparing to listen to the Buddha's teachings. The Buddha quietly opened his mouth and began to share the story of a woman's prayer. The most powerful prayer that the Buddha conveys should not be for oneself, but for the world. A prayer for my parents and ancestors, a prayer for those who are less fortunate than me, a prayer to dissolve my karma, a prayer for wisdom and compassion. When I pray for others, that blessing will return to me." The Buddha seemed to close his eyes for a moment and immerse himself in quiet meditation. The disciple quietly clasped his hands, waiting for the Buddha's words. Before long, the Buddha slowly opened his mouth. "A long time ago, there lived a poor woman in a village. She had to support her husband and young children, but she had very little. No matter how hard she worked, her situation did not improve, and each day was a continuous cycle of pain and despair. In her despair, she earnestly prayed to Buddha, 'Buddha, please grant me great wealth. If you make me rich, I will live my life doing good deeds.' Every morning at dawn, she called out Buddha's name and prayed earnestly. She continued to pray without missing a single day. But her life only became increasingly difficult. There were days when business was so bad that I had to skip meals." The Buddha paused for a moment and looked at his disciple. The disciple asked with a look of concern, "Buddha, was that woman's prayer not sincere? Why, despite her earnest prayers, was her wish not granted?" The Buddha smiled and continued the conversation. "It was not because her prayers were lacking. Her prayers were very earnest, but it was because she did not understand the essence of prayer. One day, she was so exhausted that she cried and prayed to the Buddha again. But that day was a little different. Buddha, I will no longer wish for anything. I only ask that you help my family and me not to starve to death. I will do what I can. So please guide me." That day, she prayed for the first time, letting go of her desires and accepting reality. Her faith that the Buddha would help her remained. But now she prayed not for what she could receive, but to be guided in what she could do. The disciple listened quietly and then asked again, "Buddha, did her life begin to change then?" The Buddha nodded and continued to speak. Since that day, her heart felt much lighter. She no longer felt anxious like before and did her best while accepting reality. Then, something amazing happened. She happened to meet an old man, living alone in the village. The old man, knowing that she was a sincere and kind-hearted person, asked her to help with his small shop. Thanks to that, she was able to secure a stable income, and the children no longer went hungry. After that, she continued to pray to the Buddha. However, instead of praying to become rich anymore, I prayed for you to protect me, so that I can safely get through this day. Her prayer transformed from one of greed to a true prayer of gratitude and acceptance. And as the power of prayer took effect, her life became more stable, earning the trust of others and recognition in the village. The disciple seemed deeply moved, closing his eyes and lost in thought. It's because her heart has changed. The Buddha nodded and spoke. Indeed, prayer is not merely a means to obtain what one desires. Prayer should be a force that changes my heart and transforms my life. What are you currently hoping for and praying about? The disciple pondered deeply and then replied, I have always prayed to achieve what I want. I prayed to find a good job and to live a better life. However, after hearing the Buddha's teachings, it seems that my prayer was filled with greed and attachment. The Buddha spoke with a warm smile. You have gained an important realization today. From now on, when you pray, do not just ask for what you want, but instead ask yourself how you should live and pray to clear your mind. The essence of prayer is to purify my heart and to lead my life correctly. If you do this, heaven will be moved and your path will naturally open up. The disciple quietly joined his hands and offered a prayer before the Buddha. Now his prayers have become not prayers to fulfill desires, but prayers to transform and improve himself. The Buddha quietly smiled. As he looked at such a disciple, the disciple seemed to have gained deep enlightenment and quietly reflected on the Buddha's words. The Buddha's teachings were not just simple theories, but wisdom that moves the heart. He had been offering earnest prayers all this time, but he was realizing that the essence of those prayers was flawed. After a moment of silence, the disciple cautiously spoke up. Buddha, then, how should I pray from now on? I have hoped for my life to improve and have earnestly prayed to achieve what I desire. However, looking back now, it seems that my prayers were filled with greed and attachment. The Buddha quietly smiled and nodded his head. You have now come to see the right path. The essence of prayer is not to obtain what you desire, but to change my heart and set my life right. The disciple bowed his head and contemplated the words of the Buddha. Buddha, I will no longer pray for myself. I will simply pray for the happiness of all beings in the world. Then the Buddha spoke in a soft yet firm voice, saying, Disciple, I am letting go of myself. Even while I pray, I must be whole. First, in order to help others. Do not think that praying for yourself is wrong, but the way you pray must be different. The disciple looked at the Buddha with a puzzled expression. Buddha, what does it mean? That the way of praying is different? The Buddha silently pointed to the pond. Look at this pond. When the pond is full of clear water, it can help the surrounding life and provide clean water to those who seek the pond. However, if the pond dries up and becomes murky, no matter how good your intentions are to help others, it will be of no use. Prayer is the same. First, I must make my heart pure and clear. When I become clear, your prayers will gain more strength and naturally have a positive impact on others as well. The disciple nodded deeply and engraved the Buddha's words in his heart. Then what kind of prayer should I offer? The Buddha gently smiled and spoke. I will teach you the most powerful way to pray. This prayer is not just a wish, but a true prayer. It will be the power to change your life and set the world right. The disciple folded his hands respectfully and waited for the Buddha's words. The Buddha slowly opened his mouth and said, First, pray for your parents and ancestors. My parents and ancestors gave me life. and paved the way for me to live. If you pray with a heart of gratitude for that grace, blessings will dwell in your life. Second, pray for the happiness of all beings in the world. However, it's not just about vaguely wishing for everyone's happiness. Make a commitment to take action. I will offer kind words to someone today. I will not get angry today. A prayer filled with such determination is indeed a prayer that changes the world. Third, pray for yourself, but do so in the right direction. Pray not to obtain what you desire, but for your life to go in the right way. Please guide me so that I can fulfill my role. Please grant me wisdom so that I can walk the right path. When I pray like this, my life will naturally flow in the right direction, and my desires will also be fulfilled. The disciple was deeply moved by the Buddha's words. Buddha, then prayer is indeed a practice that transforms myself. The Buddha nodded his head and said, "That's right. Prayer is not a spell to obtain what you desire. Prayer is a practice that governs my heart and sets my life right. If I sincerely pray to walk the right path, heaven will be moved and will open the way for you." The disciple quietly clasped his hands and offered another prayer. However, now his prayers were different from before. It changed from a prayer of "Please, give me more," to a prayer of "Please, help me live rightly." The Buddha quietly smiled as he looked at such a disciple. At that moment, a gentle breeze blew and created small ripples on the pond, and the moonlight was shining even more clearly. On the pond, the disciple respectfully clasped his hands and reflected on the Buddha's words. I realized that my prayers until now were solely for fulfilling my own desires. He deeply understood that, like the teachings of the Buddha, prayer is not just a spell to satisfy simple desires, but a practice that transforms the inner self. In that moment, the disciple recalled the prayers he had been making. Buddha, please grant me a good job. Buddha, please make me wealthy. Buddha, please let my wishes come true. He felt ashamed. All this time, he had only been praying to have his wishes fulfilled, instead of trying to change his life. Through prayer, the Buddha spoke quietly, as if he could read his mind, saying, "Disciple, I have begun to understand the true meaning of prayer. However, prayer should not stop at mere understanding. It must lead to practice as well. Otherwise, it is merely a simple realization. Realization without practice is like the wind, and one cannot know where it will flow." The disciple nodded as he listened to the Buddha's words and said, "Buddha, now I understand how I should pray. However, there is one thing I am curious about. As the Buddha said, prayer is about changing the heart and leading a righteous life. Yet there are still many people suffering in the world. They pray earnestly every day, but why are their prayers not being answered?" The Buddha spoke quietly, with a deep smile. Many people in the world pray, but there are various reasons why those prayers are not answered. The most important reason is that their hearts are not yet prepared. In order for prayers to be answered, one must first be ready to accept those prayers. The disciple looked at the Buddha with a puzzled expression and asked, "Buddha, what does it mean to be ready to accept prayers?" The Buddha extended his hand and pointed to a nearby tree. "Look at this tree. No matter how much water I give and how much sunlight I provide, if the seed is not planted properly, the tree will not grow. Similarly, even if I pray, if the seed in my heart is not planted correctly, that prayer, no matter how sincere, will be hard to fulfill. For example, someone may pray to become wealthy, but they still spend money recklessly, lack self-control, and do not work diligently. Then, can that prayer be fulfilled?" The disciple slowly shook his head. "No, Buddha, with that mindset, no matter how much you pray, you won't be able to become rich. the Buddha smiled again. Yes, prayer is not simply about wishing. Prayer is about changing oneself. When I pray, it leads to my actions. And when my actions change, my life changes as well. The disciple said in admiration, "So prayer is indeed a practice that changes my life. It's not about what I want, but rather what comes to fruition. When I am ready," the Buddha quietly nodded his head. "I have now gained an important realization. Then I will teach you how to practice prayer." The disciple is ready to listen to the Buddha's teachings. First, prayer should be sincere, but it must not become an obsession. Second, prayer should be accompanied by the right mindset and practice. Third, prayer should be for others. While prayers for my own life are important, prayers wishing for the happiness of others hold a greater and stronger power. Fourth, prayer should come from a heart of gratitude. When you pray, be thankful for what you have already received and pray that you may improve through it. The disciple gained deep insight and quietly clasped his hands together. "Buddha, today I have gained this insight and will change my prayers. From now on, I will not pray to satisfy my own desires. Instead, I will pray to live my life rightly and for all beings in the world to find peace." The Buddha spoke with a pleased smile, saying, "Good. Now I have come to understand the true meaning of prayer. Prayer is not simply about fulfilling my desires, but a process of changing myself and making the world right. When I pray with a sincere heart, even heaven will be moved and open the way for you." The disciple quietly joined his hands, deeply engraving the Buddha's words in his heart. At that moment, a gentle breeze passed over the pond, creating a serene ripple. The moonlight grew brighter, giving the feeling that the entire world was being peacefully embraced. The disciple deeply thanked the Buddha and quietly offered a prayer in his heart. Now he no longer sought to gain anything through prayer. He only wished to walk the right path. The Buddha quietly smiled as he looked at such a disciple. A prayer that even moved the heavens was resonating at that moment. Prayer is an important way to express our inner selves. However, prayer does not necessarily bring about the desired results. What matters when we pray is the direction of our hearts. Incorrect prayers stem from greed and attachment. A prayer like "Buddha, please give me money" arises merely from a desire to fulfill personal wants. Such prayers may give us temporary satisfaction, but they do not bring about a fundamental change in our hearts. The reason we do not truly become happy, even when we get what we want, lies right here. Desire is always endless, so such prayers ultimately only create an infinite thirst. On the other hand, a proper prayer embodies a sincere heart that shares and gives. A prayer like "Buddha, please guide me so that I can help others" expresses an open heart, not just for oneself, but towards others and the world. This prayer arises from a desire to connect myself with others beyond the ego. When we pray like this, our lives begin to change little by little. When the direction of my heart changes, it naturally leads to my actions and choices. The sincerity of prayer is more important than the results. When our mindset changes, the direction of our prayers also changes, and accordingly, our lives transform. Being grateful for what we have and living for others ultimately brings true happiness. One day, a disciple came to see the Buddha. The disciple was spending each day in a quiet mountain following the Buddha's teachings, but felt an emptiness in a corner of his heart. So I asked the Buddha, "Buddha, I am praying diligently, but I cannot understand why my prayers are not being answered. Can prayer really come true?" The Buddha smiled and answered his disciple, "Prayer is not just a simple wish, my disciple. Prayer is a process of changing the heart, and in turn, changing one's actions according to that heart. A prayer that merely desires external material results is not a true prayer. Prayer is not about getting what I want, but about asking how I should live. The disciple fell into a moment of thought. Then how should I pray? The disciple asked again. The Buddha looked at the disciple with a deep gaze and answered, "One should pray not for what they want, but for what they can do. It is not about knowing what I want and finding a way to achieve it, but rather praying for what I can do right now." The disciple still seems a bit confused and asks, "Then how can I achieve what I want? Isn't it just praying for what I can do?" The Buddha answered with a quiet smile. "Prayer is what changes my heart first. When my heart changes, my actions will change accordingly. And when those actions change, the external reality will also change accordingly. Prayer is not just a way to achieve the results I desire, but a way to turn the direction of my heart." Does this mean that the teachings of the Buddha, which I have gradually come to understand, indicate that prayer changes my heart and that change transforms my life? The Buddha nodded and said, "Yes, through prayer, I realize what I truly want, and through that realization, I reflect on myself, and the process of becoming a better person is precisely prayer. Remember that inner change leads to outer change. When the heart changes, the world changes accordingly." The disciple listened to the profound teachings of the Buddha and hoped that his prayers would not be limited to merely seeking material results. Only then did he begin to gradually understand the true meaning of prayer. On that day, after his conversation with the Buddha, the disciple started to contemplate more deeply about the difference between right and wrong prayers. After contemplating for several days, I reflected on whether my prayers were indeed the right prayers, and eventually I went to see the Buddha once again. "Buddha," I prayed, "but I do not know if that prayer was the right one. Sometimes I wonder if my prayers are not just wishes for what I want. Are such prayers considered wrong prayers?" The Buddha answered with a gentle smile. "A misguided prayer is one that arises from greed and attachment. For example, praying to the Buddha, 'Please, give me money,' is a prayer that comes from the desire to obtain material things. It is nothing more than a prayer that desires only external things, without a deep reflection on what I truly need." The disciple nodded, thinking that what was said was correct. "Then what is the right prayer?" The Buddha spoke once again. In that calm voice, "The right prayer comes from a heart that shares and gives. Praying, 'Buddha, please guide me to help others,' is not just for myself, but a prayer that deeply contemplates my relationship with others and this world. It becomes a prayer. In the truest sense, the disciple closed his eyes and contemplated the words of the Buddha. "So, you mean that prayer is not just about achieving what I want, but rather asking how I should live my life?" The Buddha calmly smiled and said, "Yes, prayer is about changing my mindset. When the mindset changes, the direction of prayer naturally changes as well. Prayer is ultimately an important moment that determines what kind of person I will become. Through inner change, life also changes, and that change influences the world." The disciple has come to realize the importance of prayer that leads to inner transformation, rather than seeking material results. And now he clearly understands that when he prays sincerely every day, that prayer is not just for external achievements, but a process of transforming the heart. Prayer was an important bridge, connecting me to the world, and through that prayer, he can grow into a better person. The disciple gained many insights. Through conversations with the Buddha, I realized that the things I had wanted to achieve through prayer, such as material success or external changes, were merely to satisfy my own desires. And now, the disciple who has gained a deep understanding of what prayer is confessed to the Buddha, "Buddha, I understand now. Prayer is not about obtaining what I desire, but about closing and transforming my heart. Prayer was a process of reflecting on myself and transforming my inner self beyond worries or desires about what I might gain." The Buddha spoke calmly, rejoicing in the disciple's enlightenment. "Yes, my disciple, if I pray correctly, even the heavens will be moved and open your path." Prayer goes beyond simple wishes. It reveals your true heart and becomes an important force that connects you to the world. When your heart is purified, that heart naturally influences the world. The disciple is deeply grateful for the Buddha's teachings and has now engraved the true meaning of prayer in their heart. His gaze brightened even more, and peace found its way into his heart. The disciple quietly joined his hands in prayer, offering deep gratitude. What kind of resonance did today's video give you? Please leave a comment with the most memorable phrase from today's story. I would like to share thoughts together. I hope today's teachings of the Buddha bring you peace and wisdom in your heart. Wishing you always good health and happiness. And I look forward to seeing you again next time. Thank you.